Ptolemy Philadelphus then sent envoys from Alexandria to offer all of this gigantic fortune, you know, to Neleus for him to give up Aristotle's books. Well, Neleus he consented to give the books to the envoys from Ptolemy, except that he didn't give all. In fact, what he did was really he duped them. Let's just put it that way. He duped those envoys. He gave them some stuff that he wrote. He gave them some forgeries, some copies, some badly put together, botched up, you know, stuck together type of manuscripts. He gave them. Well, he gave the books that Theophrastus owned, and he also gave them books from Aristotle's library, his own personal library, but certainly not Aristotle's books themselves. Now, after the death of Neleus, so all of the, once again, all of these were not the original manuscripts at all. After the death of Neleus, his relatives took these manuscripts and they buried these things underneath the floorboards of the kitchen in their house, and they remained there for a long period of time. By this time, in the great center of learning, the Library and Museum of Alexandria, Aristotle's ideas, or what were thought of his ideas as imported from the scholars, were much written about, as imported, I should say, as bought from Neleus, were much written about and discussed, but these were not the original works. Now, a short time later, one of the relatives of Neleus dug up the ancient manuscripts of Aristotle and sold them for an undisclosed sum of money to a person by the name of Apellicon of Teos. Apellicon was not only a bibliophile, but also prided himself on being something of a philosopher. But in reality, he was no more than an avid collector of antiques. However, he did benefit greatly by his friendship with one of the tyrants of Athens by the name of Athenian. Both of them fancied themselves as philosophers, of such sensitivity and learning that they felt more than competent working up a first edition of the collected manuscripts of Aristotle, the actual manuscripts now of Aristotle. However, Apellicon was so inept that he filled in the gaps in the papyrus manuscripts, the gaps that are created by moths and by mildew, with philosophical nonsense, basically, philosophical inventions of his own. As badly botched up as the project was, it still greatly impressed Athenion, who afforded Apellicon with protection and great privileges. And it must be noted that Apellicon was one of the greatest human disasters in history. He mismanaged and messed up nearly everything that he undertook, from editing Aristotle's manuscripts to governing the island of Delos. Luckily, as fate and destiny would have it, the Roman general Sulla had laid siege to Athens, and in 89 BC he took it by storm. Apellicon's great library had become the possession of Sulla's, and Sulla removed Aristotle's manuscripts, the genuine manuscripts, to Rome. And he made them the centerpiece of his own great library. The Romans were great collectors of books. He hired a librarian, Sulla did, whose main function was to care for these rare and famous manuscripts. At Rome at this time was a certain Greek by the name of Tyrannion. He was a very serious scholar, and Tyrannion frequented Sulla's villa to converse about things philosophical with the librarian. It was there quite often. In due time, he was able to persuade the librarian to, of course, with certain monetary persuasion, okay, to persuade the librarian to loan him Aristotle's manuscripts. He was with the intention here of him copying these manuscripts and basically making them into a first edition, but doing it in a genuine and scholarly fashion. But it never occurred to him that the compliant librarian sold copies of these manuscripts to a variety of other individuals also. In fact, the market was flooded with book buyers of these various types of these various manuscripts. Upon learning this, Tyrrhenian gave up his project, entrusting the entire project to the distinguished logician Andronicus of Rhodes, who took on the ungrateful task of collecting Aristotle's separate treatises into books. Meanwhile, the originals had been returned to Rome, to the library of Sulla's son Faustus. Poor dumb Faustus was a spendthrift, and in order to pay off his debts, he decided to sell the entire library that his father had given him, and this, of course, included Aristotle's precious manuscripts. So it was that the Aristotelian scrolls disappeared forever. It is not known how they were dispersed, or by whom, or where, or by what. Many probably ended up in private libraries, others probably ended up in trash heaps, and others probably were destroyed by the many barbarian invasions that eventually led to the downfall of Rome in 476. No manuscripts, all forgeries out there, all fraudulent copies out there, so many things. It is not known that what we know today about Aristotle's thinking about his works were actually his works, were actually his way of thinking. And this is kind of interesting because if Aristotle indeed, if his philosophy, if his ideas established the very foundation and bedrock of Western civilization, maybe the whole thing is just pure speculation on my part, but maybe the whole thing was, maybe the whole thing is just a fiction.